This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so just a little bit about me before I begin. My name is Rachel Lewis. I am the Assistant Manager of Visitor Engagement at the Brooklyn Museum in New York, an art museum. And so, as an archaeologist by education and a museum person by profession, I've always thought really deeply about ways to better communicate, in a museum setting at least, how ancient objects looked and functioned in their original context. For example, how to convey that these Roman amphora once lined the walls and shelves of a wine shop in an ancient town, or that these coins were discovered as part of a massive cache literally stuffed to the gills into clay vessels, or that these reliefs and this monumental sculpture of Alamasu once decorated the elaborate palace of an ancient Assyrian ruler. The closest you'll get in an art museum is something like this, and you'll notice, I'm sure, that there's several key elements missing, which we'll get to later. But the truth is, in a museum setting, the galleries, the way that they're traditionally installed, don't really capture the spirit of their ancient objects, which were often functional or ritual and a part of everyday life. And so, in thinking of how to enhance this experience of learning about ancient objects in a museum, my affinity for technology pushed me in the direction of a digital solution. In the museum world, it's true that there is an aversion to digital technology, especially in the gallery. And that fear stems from taking people out of the experience of looking at art and instead turning their attention towards screens. But I think, and this study corroborates, that augmented reality in particular provides a great opportunity for enriching the experience of seeing art and can actually encourage closer looking. So I decided to begin at my own institution. The Egyptian, classical, and ancient Near Eastern galleries at the Brooklyn Museum are among our most popular and, I would argue, most misleading. Anyone who has walked through an exhibition of Greek, Roman, Egyptian, or Near Eastern sculpture likely came away with the impression that these ancient cultures preferred a stark, colorless, minimalist aesthetic. And this is kind of further compounded by what's known as a myth of whiteness in classical sculpture that has really colored perceptions about the value of whiteness and diversity in the ancient world. And it's not difficult to understand why alabaster, sandstone, limestone, marble, and other white or light colored stone are what dominate these gallery spaces. And it's in this form that most early archaeologists and scholars were pulling them out of the ground, and it was those people who established kind of the canon of classical antiquity. So we're forced to kind of work against those preconceptions. Um, However, the truth of the matter is this, that while stone is enduring, luckily for us, pigment, however, is not. And in most cases, these objects have been exposed to elements for millennia or buried for the same or similar amounts of time. And so what you're seeing in a museum, however pristine the surface might appear, is actually the product of immense pigment degradation over time. And so artists from these cultures were actually known to paint their sculpture with a variety of colors, a practice known as polychromy. And so, kind of using this theme of color as a jumping off point, I began to craft, in my mind at the very least, an AR experience that would first deepen users' understanding of ancient art and culture, second, disrupt these widely held beliefs about whiteness in the ancient world, and third, activate innovation in the field of digital museum engagement, especially with regard to AR and VR solutions, which I think are severely underused and could be extremely helpful in our context. Um, and I thought this is a good time to mention that this is not really a new idea, as many aren't. Various museum institutions have experimented with ways to get across a similar message. The two images on the left are examples of reliefs colorized using projectors. And this presents certain challenges that wouldn't work in our museum and other museum contexts, the first being the ability to control ambient light in the gallery, as well as the prohibitive costs of high-powered projectors, as well as thinking about the footprint of such projectors in the gallery space. The image on the right is pulled from a video of a digital reconstruction of an ancient Assyrian palace, in which, while is an amazing experience, doesn't really allow for direct interaction with the artifacts themselves in a gallery context, which is what I'm really interested in, is how can we capture and engage with people while they're in the museum looking at stuff. Um, and so, as a person with a cursory knowledge of user experience design, who is neither a graphic designer nor a developer, I had to really rely on online resources and basic programs to craft a prototype. I tweaked the image of the colorized relief that you see on the right in PowerPoint to create an overlay that would match the figure on the reliefs in the Brooklyn Museum's collection, which is the image on the left. Just moved to the center. Next, I used HP Reveal Studios, which was formerly known as Aurasma, to upload the trigger image, assign the appropriate overlays, and set basic basic touch gestures to trigger expanded information on the various pigment results. And so, first, a user would aim their mobile device camera at the reliefs, triggering the overlay. Then, on a slight delay, the pigment tag would appear. In this case, we have a little bit of Egyptian blue in the eye. And then, if visitors are curious to learn more about any given pigment, they can tap and the tag and expanded information will appear on the screen. And so the end result is an effective, if basic experience. And so while I was working on this kind of prototype, I realized that for a person or an institution with limited resources, as most cultural institutions are, this could really serve as a final product. Um, However, the potential for growth and scalability is great. If you think about object-specific research conducted by archaeologists and pigment specialists that could inform content, object-specific overlays created by graphic and augmented reality designers, content developed by or in conjunction with curators and educators, and perhaps even one day a dedicated mobile app that's coded by developers. And so at the Brooklyn Museum, we're currently working on the first three in hopes of rolling out a more complete version of this experience by January 2020. In conjunction with our conservation team, I'm compiling research to inform the color overlays that our graphic design team will execute, as well as the content that our curatorial team will review, which is very exciting. But wait, what challenges? Yeah, I thought this presentation wouldn't be complete if I didn't address at least some of the challenges I faced during this process. The first being that when using free online tools, sometimes they stop being free and online. In July, all HP Reveal Studio accounts were retired and the web studio taken offline for an undisclosed amount of time. The only note being that information on the new expanded offering would be coming in 2020. And so, with no timeline or guarantees that the new offering would be free, I had to find a new tool that, while serviceable, doesn't really quite measure up to HP Reveal's look and feel or functionality. And so you'll see on the screen now another prototype that I created with Blip AR, Blip Builder, another online AR creation tool. And second, another challenge we're still troubleshooting is the best way to deliver this app or this experience to our visitors. Research shows that visitors are averse to downloading apps for a singular experience in museums. And so because of this, we're likely going to install an iPad in the gallery that has the app pre-downloaded and locked for visitors to pick up and use with little to no fuss. But this decision, of course, incurs costs related to hardware, and flexible, durable, likely custom mounts that we'll either have to buy or build in-house. But despite this, the potential for AR in museums extends far beyond colorizing sculpture. As a low-cost, low-footprint, high-impact engagement method, the possibilities really are endless and as yet untapped. And so this tech provides opportunities to build up or peel back the layers of various kinds of art from ancient to contemporary. And I'm sure has various applications in your fields, which I'm excited to hear about during the following Q&A. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you. I see we have a good group of people on this call,
Oh, wow.
including Sharon, who was also there in Brooklyn. I was hoping, Sharon, if you might be able to go on mute and perhaps you can share your reflections when you saw the talk in Brooklyn 5 months ago. This was with twice the time, but any reflections from your side, Sharon?
I'm going to start with a small apology because I was slightly late, so I missed the first couple of minutes. But hi there, Rachel.
Hello.
Hey, it was really good to see that 'cause when you did this out in Brooklyn, because it was such a short, 5-minute slot. It's really good to see it expanded, but it feels like you've made loads of progress in the last 5 months as well about it kind of maturing as a product and being something that's gone from being kind of experimental or a little side project to actually being an integral part of the way that the museum presents its artifacts. Is that fair to say?
Very fair, yes. We've had buy-in from the curatorial, visitor experience, and leadership teams. So it's really exciting that people are on board, and so we can start to develop it more fully.
Really fantastic to see. Thank you. So I hand back to you, Janus.
Thank you.
Questions.
Thank you. Yes, if there's any questions, you can post them in the chat. That's probably the easiest way. If you don't have the chat, if you're just dialing in, let's see if we can do it without too many interruptions. But there was one more on the call that I wanted to hand over to, and that's Michael Bettner-Brandt. He's Austrian and working with corporate innovation. And I thought that given that, Rachel, you're the only one, I think, to my knowledge, on this call who works in the museum context, and you're sharing an example of something that I think could also, we can also use tech to improve the customer experience in so many other ways. So I was just wondering, Michael, if you could perhaps speak to, might you have seen other examples of augmented reality? Any like translation, like Rachel said, even banks or pharmaceuticals don't have limitless resources. So perhaps curious to hear your perspective, Michael, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. So far, we have seen a lot of excitement about augmented reality, but the only use cases I'm aware of or I've seen personally are in a very, very specific controlled environment, like, for example, with workers in complex storage facilities, right? How to find stuff and identify the right places, situations like that, or in service situations where people try to solve maintenance topics for complex machinery that people don't interact with every day, do that through augmented reality. I found it interesting what you said about the realization that goes hand in hand that people are unlikely to install apps, right, for a visit into a museum. Any further thoughts down that road? Any things you tried out or explored or got feedback on in that context?
Yes. When I started at the museum, I worked as a part of their team for the app that the Brooklyn Museum currently has called Ask Brooklyn Museum, that allows visitors to text questions in real time to a team of art historians who will respond. And so I was one of those art historians, and we found that the largest barrier to getting people to use the app is having to download it on their phones. And so we've kind of been hovering at about a 2% use rate since, I believe, probably around year 2 of the project. And so there's certain ways we've tried to ameliorate that, one being introducing a texting phone number, but even then it's kind of hard to get people to engage with us. So I think we've seen more success when we just have resources available in the gallery that people can choose to walk up to, pick up, and use. That tends to be more successful than putting the onus on them to have to use their own device to engage in any meaningful way.
Cool, thanks.
I also saw a question, Rachel, on can you give any kind of rough estimate into how much effort went into what you demonstrated? Can you perhaps elaborate a little bit on it? It sounded almost like you did it in your own kind of hackathon over an evening, but perhaps you can elaborate a bit.
Yes, so for the prototype, which I showed you videos of, probably the largest effort went into researching what I could use. I really began this project thinking that I wouldn't ever be able to see it to fruition because I wasn't a developer and I didn't know anyone who could code for me. And so once I had those resources and I learned how they worked, which is basically using a series of um, image files, PNGs I use mostly because of the transparency. It was really quick to put together. What is going to take long now as we're working on the expanded experience, the one that we're actually going to roll out in the museum, is the research phase. It's pulling together all the resources from 19th century excavation accounts, as well as working on a very technical side with our conservation team, who's doing various types of analysis on the stone to see what kind of pigment remains that they can pick up that way, as well as trying to approximate the correct color hues. That work is going to take, I would imagine, about a month and a half before we can really hand it over to our visual designers, who will then put together a somewhat hopefully accurate colorized overlay and make all the image files for me so that I can re-upload them into the product, into the online creation tool and create the final project. If that answers your question, who was it? Bernd.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great. Thank you. I also think we have on the call Sam dialing in from Switzerland. Hello there, Sam.
Hello.
Hi, Sam.
One of our more technical members. Any examples, any reflections from your side, Sam?
I thought it was very interesting. After I don't have much experience in VR, so I didn't really work in the domain. I think it's quite impressive what you did with a few means, because when we see what it takes, to develop full softwares and have the full experience, customized experience, it's quite an achievement already, and I'm quite impressed. I didn't see anything in Switzerland done with VR in museum. I'm not going that much in museum as well, but I think I thought it was very interesting to see how you can enhance the experience with that, and I would really like to see much more. I had seen very light it's not VR, it's people who actually project have some paintings, and you can look through a box and see how it could have looked, it's done in ruins, and you could see how the village was represented in the landscape where you are, by just looking through a box and having the picture kind of displayed on the landscape, but it is not it's really manual work, and it was quite cool. So I'm sure that with VR we can really enhance the experience in museum, and really look forward to see more of that. So thank you for sharing.
On the chat, we also have a comment from Marcel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Marcel Bouw from Holland. I love your presentation, and we are working with AR for museums since 2015. So we did a lot of research the last few years, and we implemented some presentations and enriched visitors' experience on different kind of musea in Holland. So I thought when you are still in the research phase, maybe it's a nice idea to have a talk later, and I can even come over to New York to meet you, and maybe we can help you on your project, or exchange knowledge or something like that. We're also working in archaeology also in the south of Holland, and it's all completely AR experience in the outside world, and it only works on specific geolocations.
Oh yeah, open air, augmented reality.
Yes.
I've seen some stuff on that. That's really, I would love to talk more with you.
So
Okay.
Marcel, any insights from your side on this major roadblock to, how do you get people to participate and be a part of the experience without having to install an app? Any learnings you can share?
Yes, we implemented some prepared iPads at the museum.
Okay.
That makes it very easy, so that's a good choice. And we also made it very easy to download the app, because the app is not only for one museum, but it's for all musea. And the backend is completely open source. We can change content in real time. So we thought about a lot of things already. And the app itself is very light. And it also works on older phones. So you don't need to have a phone which works only with ARKit from Apple or ARCore from Google.
Cool. Yeah. For our iPad in gallery, we're currently researching a good mount because we don't want to have it freestanding or that mobile so that visitors can't walk away with them. So one of the things I'm currently working on is trying to figure out a durable kind of stable mount that still allows people to pick the iPad up and have a limited range of motion as they're looking at the relief through it, but that can be then again like nested in some kind of mount or display. So I'd be interested to hear how your iPad in gallery experience went.
Okay.
Very good.
Well, we can talk about that later, maybe.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
We can do it also now, but I don't think it's interesting for everybody.
Museum specific world. But thank you, Marcel, for sharing your insights and being a part of this. I wanted to call also to Matt Garapi, who is based in Florida, but has been spending a lot of time also this year on digital experience. And you were also in Brooklyn and heard the presentation there, the short version of it. Any insights, perspectives you can share, Matt?
Yeah. Hey, Rachel, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing what you're doing. This is very exciting stuff. Full disclosure, I'm a museum buff. Much to my teenage son's chagrin, sometimes we drag him to museums everywhere we go. And he will appreciate it later much more than he does now. But I think that from a user experience perspective, having digital is a way of really embracing Gen Z, and I think this is the currency of their life, really. I mean, this is the way they connect is through data and through digital. And we took him to San Francisco this summer, and we actually saw the Ed Hardy exhibit that they had at the Museum of Modern Art. And one thing that struck me is how much projection and how much interaction they had with the displays. And I think maybe it feels like it's the domain of modern art, but what I'm seeing here is that there's so many ways to open it up into antiquity, and I love that.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to share about my own recent experiences with AR, specific to I think what you're doing, and just to ask some questions as well. In a digital peer group that Giannis and I have been doing here in North America, actually had an opportunity to have someone from Home Depot who's running their digital experience and really doing it at scale, come in and talk about how they used AR to really revolutionize a physical in-store experience by giving users the ability to actually interact with both products and their own home spaces. They're able to visualize through their phones or iPads what a piece of furniture or something they purchase at Home Depot would look like, or how it would fit in their home. And it's had a huge impact on the way that they've been able to drive more people into the store, more traffic into the store. What I found really interesting, though, is that the approach to solving this problem, like how would we do it? How do we afford to do it? How do we justify it? Part of that was offset by going to Georgia Tech and partnering with their team around this concept of inline innovation. And I'm wondering if you've looked into or thought about how to tap some of those maybe incubator type resources as a way to overcome some of these challenges. And I think some of the best ideas, of course, are coming from universities. So I just wanted to toss that out there.
No, it's a really good point.